and time again, and this time, I'm going to be talking about games that I used to hate, but don't hate anymore. Games for this list fall into two categories. One being that you hate a game in the first part, but as the game presses on, you appreciate it more. Another being when you hate a game from beginning to end, but then think back at it and think, wait a minute, this game wasn't that bad, and I'm going to count down those games. Now, here are the rules. It can't be a game that I had always liked, but liked more than I did back then. I have to have hated the game at least 1 point, but I cannot still hate it. So, here we go. Now let's say you get a big group of people that all think the Star Fox series is ruined. If you were to ask what game they thought ruined the series prior to 2016, they would probably answer with Star Fox Adventures. And I'd probably have been one of them. But you want to know what the funny thing is? I actually had not played the games that came out after Adventures at the time. So I was in no position to say that Adventures ruined the franchise. Especially since years later I played Assault and Zero and enjoyed them both. And no, I haven't played Command. So, why did I hate Star Fox Adventures? Well, I kind of want to hate it because some of the voice acting is very irritating, there are a few muddy visuals every once in a while, and because the scene where Fox first sees Crystal is more creepy than cute, if only because of the music. But when I really think about it, that's pretty much all I got when it comes to reasons for hating the game, even if they do stick out the most. This game did grow on me, but not in a way that I think it's necessarily good now like some of the later entries, but because I just don't think I'd be able to find enough justifiable reasons for calling this game terrible. I bet a lot of you know by now how I am mostly a Nintendo gamer who doesn't come out of my comfort zone very often. Probably the furthest I've strayed from my comfort zone is when I first played Shadow of the Colossus. Unlike most video games I've played, this one is serious throughout pretty much the whole game. This might be the most serious game I've ever played, and as a result, the graphical style is pretty much dark gray and green throughout the whole game, making the world look kinda boring. But it does work in context with the serious tone I mentioned, especially when killing off the Colossi. The gameplay is still very repetitive though, having to ride your horse Agron, Agro, for about 15 minutes looking for the Colossi, and repeating to yourself, "Are we there yet?" every 5 seconds. And if you're a newcomer to this game, killing these bosses can take somewhere between 15 minutes to nearly an hour. So, I still don't particularly like it as a game, but I eventually learned to appreciate it for what it's supposed to be, in art form. But in the end, I'd say I'd neither love it or hate it. I probably wouldn't mind playing it again, but this is why I usually stick with Nintendo games. Or at least games that are similar to that of Nintendo. I wasn't a big fan of Splatoon when it came out. And I know I probably triggered a bunch of angry fans since it's one of the most well-known launch titles on the Wii U, but it's true. I started out not liking it that much. That's because I found the levels to be somewhat repetitive. Sometimes it felt like we were more so getting to the other side of the map than actually seeing what kind of puzzles we're in for. But not too many are like that. After a while of having this game being on the fine line between a meh game and a game I hate, I happened to get some good memories of it. Probably because I saw Josh Scorcher's list of games I love and hate, and realized it's possible to have a love-hate relationship with games. I even put this game on my own love and hate games list. I remember that the level gimmicks were actually very creative, and the Inklings are actually pretty cute. Not to mention how catchy some of the songs are. And also, when I originally played the game, I hadn't tried the online mode, which people said that Splatoon was all about. So, I decided to give it a try, and I liked it. It was really fun playing on teams and trying to code the levels in paint. I still spend more time on single player, but I still grew to like this game a lot more. I remember despising Xenoblade Chronicles X with a passion for the first few hours I played it. And yet, I can't really think of why. Is it because it's a different style of game? Well, that would make me look like a hypocrite since I like the first Xenoblade Chronicles. I'm guessing it might have to do with how you use a gun, which for some reason makes it look like one of those shooters like Halo or Grand Theft Auto, which I'm not interested in. It could even be because of the amount of systems to manage, or how easy it is to get sidetracked. I think another reason why I could have hated it at first is because I knew it would take months to beat, and I couldn't bear to put up with this for months. But when I think about it, I could have taken more breaks from it like I did with the first Xenoblade Chronicles. It definitely became a very enjoyable experience for me. I even grew to appreciate the gun because it lets you attack enemies from a distance. The environments still look really nice. There were some bosses that I was having several problems with because they take forever to kill normally, but that's because I wasn't using the skells. because they significantly increase your strength, and sometimes even let you travel faster. I still hate having to go back to the Blade Barracks to refuel them though, but I still love them overall, and I love the game overall. And when Xenoblade 2 was announced, I promised myself that I wouldn't make the same mistake of prematurely judging that game like I did with this game. And I didn't, even though I was really tempted to. I couldn't keep my promise of not prematurely judging other games though, but we'll get there in a few entries. I think I now know what had gotten into me that caused me to originally hate Pokemon Ranger Guardian signs. It must have been because I remembered multiple things in this game that bothered me, and I thought too hard about them, causing me to think I hated the game, which led to me doing a review on it, which was also a terrible review. Watch at your own risk. But what were those reasons? Well, the big Booker Bridge for one, which gets repetitive across, the added Rage mode, which just adds fake difficulty by giving some enemy Pokemon more health, and a few small problems like giving some of the villains uninspired names and stuff like that. Yes, those are problems, but I also feel like most of them are not enough for me to call an entire game bad. But I haven't told you the worst part, the past missions. Your level doesn't carry over to them, you're at a completely different level in the past. You have to do entire missions on time limits. But then I was eventually reminded that those are optional. Yeah, that's right. My biggest reason for hating a game was something that's optional. It's still a series of redundant side quests, but doesn't kill the game on its own. And if you saw the commentary I did on myself this past summer, you'd probably remember me saying that I'm going to do a commentary on my rant of the game. And I still have plans of doing that commentary, because now I have a much fairer judgment of the game. Do I think it's as good as Shadows of Almia? No, but this was still a really fun game. I just didn't have very reasonable standards when I first played it. I remember back then, around the time I first joined the Countdown community, everyone acted like it would make you look cool to diss on Final Fantasy VII. And even though I was mindlessly on the Sephiroth hate bandwagon, I was unsure about people's complaints about Final Fantasy VII itself, though I hadn't played the game at the time. 6 years later, I finally did. I did enjoy the game, but it didn't start out like that. The first 4 hours set you in this nearly dull and gray underground city called Midgar that doesn't have any of the decent color palettes that you take for granted in the traditional games. It also brought us a few small gems, like an unforgivable translation error that I thankfully knew about before I first played, and a segment where you have to climb around 100 flights of stairs that go on and on and on. And even when you finally reach the surface, you're almost immediately thrown into a flashback segment that's almost an hour long, with very few indications of where to go, and one of the most confusing villain backstories ever written. But once that's all over, the colors become better, and the game proves to be a lot of fun with its many different types of environments. The gameplay is also pretty fun, well, except for how the graphics make it hard to tell what the layout is. And the music is just plain beautiful. And even though the graphics are really ugly, it does feel nice seeing a Final Fantasy game in 3D. I haven't played any Final Fantasy games after it, not counting remakes, because I've heard each game after was lackluster, but I've heard a few people praise them. But as for now, this is the most recent installment I played, and it was a fun note to go out on. At least until I decided to get Final Fantasy VIII. And here's the game that gave me the most inspiration to make this countdown. Fire Emblem Three Houses did not impress me at first, especially considering how much money it cost. The first chapter played out like a traditional Fire Emblem game, but after that, you instantly get hit with its signature mechanic, the monastery. The game's gimmick is that you're a professor at a military school at the times where you're not fighting against evil. If I wanted a magical school simulator, I'd play a Harry Potter game. For the first few chapters, playing the game honestly felt like a chore. I'd be a terrible teacher in real life, and yet this game was all like, you are gonna be a teacher and you are gonna like it. I dreaded every teaching segment until I realized that it actually does affect how people perform in combat by advancing their skill levels with certain weapons. And even if you do something wrong, it doesn't seem to do anything too harmful. Exploring the monastery can be somewhat boring at times, but doing certain activities like sharing a meal is a great way to build up your support. So unlike World of Garbage, this actually has a reason to prolong the game. Though if I'm gonna be honest with you, I mainly did the monastery segment so I could get with my waifu. I'm weird, am I? Some of us are weird like that. But either way, I'm really mad at myself for previously hating the game. For it shows that I forgot what I learned when playing Xenoblade X about waiting until a bit later in the game before judging it. I'd be lying if I said I no longer had any problems with it though. The monastery still artificially lengthens the game. You no longer have infinite time to go back and train anymore. It's possible to miss your chance to get married because you need to do some ring side quests to do so. Weapons are once again breakable, which hinders the gameplay, and unlike Robin and Corrin, who you play as in the 3DS games, Byleth just has that blank stare on his face for pretty much the whole game. Not that he's unlikable, he's just not as interesting as Robin or Corrin. I'm guessing that was probably so we could project our own emotions onto him, but you can't please everyone. And the most fun part is that you have to play through the same first half of the game 3 times to get every ending. So here's how I describe it. I'd say Three Houses can be boring the first time you play it, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually really great, and much better than Fire Emblem Radiant Disappointment. Still too early to say it's as good as Fates though. Skyward Sword and I have quite the history together. I hated the game and regarded it as one of the absolute worst games ever. Then I looked back at it and realized I love it. And then I watched some Let's Plays and realized that maybe my original hatred towards it wasn't that unjustified. I originally hated the game for a couple reasons, like the graphics looking really ugly at times. But while they are sometimes ugly, other times they can actually be quite nice to look at, even if the pixels are very noticeable for a Wii game. The controls also aren't quite as horrible as I made them out to be. They're still somewhat unimpressive, but not always like this. They do take a lot of getting used to though. And one of the reasons I thought they were bad was because the enemies kept guarding against them. Well, that's mostly because the AI has improved to make them smarter. I also hated the villains of the game, but I eventually grew to respect them more, for they can actually be pretty intimidating at times, and don't really do anything to hinder the story. Well, except for this one time where Girahim breaks up this cute moment. But overall, this game is actually really good. I may have had better reasons for how I used to hate it than with the other entries, but this game is better than what I gave it credit for. I mainly got the game Mario Kart 8 Deluxe so I could play the new battle courses, which are much more fun than the Wii U's battle courses, because these ones are actual arenas and not just racetracks being reused. But unfortunately, the rest of the game didn't really appeal to me because of one of the Mario franchise's worst mechanics: stupid steering. Oh wait, I should refer to it as what we're supposed to call it: smart steering. You know how modern games seem to underestimate your intelligence and outright tell you what you need to do even when it's as plain as day what you need to do? Well, it can't get much worse than it is here. It's supposed to keep you from going off the track, but it's the bane of veteran Mario Kart players' experience. Because even if you're a few yards away from the edge, it'll still force you away from it. And you remember all those awesome shortcuts that are half the fun of playing at times? Well, you can forget about those. This got me worried for the future of the Mario Kart series. Though, to be honest, I still am, because they still won't give us Mario Kart 9, unless you count a mobile game. Back to this game. I thought this was a completely ruined version of Mario Kart 8. But man, did I feel silly when I found out one bit of info: that you can actually turn smart steering off. Yep, that's all you have to do, and problem solved. Now I can finally enjoy this game like I wanted to. And there was a chance I might finally accept this as a definitive Mario Kart 8. But even though I can accept this game, I still have no reason to play it again. And I still kind of prefer the Wii U version, because that was a completely new game, while this was a near exact remake where everything that would impress me already impressed me in the Wii U version, and because everything's unlocked from the start, I didn't have as much motivation to play through all the cups. That's what keeps this game from being number 1. Are you surprised? Considering how much I praise the Kingdom Hearts franchise and proclaim Kingdom Hearts Recoded as the only lackluster game, you wouldn't expect this. Yes, there was actually a time where I hated Kingdom Hearts 2. Why? Because of this reason. I was a dumb teenager. 11 years ago, I just pointed out a bunch of small problems with the game and assumed that I hated the game because of said problems. And most of them were either nitpicks or just stuff that won't kill the game as a whole. The Dusk Nobodies having ugly designs, Cypher being a jerk, the Gullwing Keyblade cutscene being annoying, the fact that I wasn't a big fan of the song Tension Rising, Santa still being disappointed in Sora for something he did 7 years ago, and Sora sounding different than he did in the first, which of course he'd sound different. He's aged, duh! And I also thought the bosses were too easy, but I said that mainly because I beat them on my first try, which doesn't always mean they're easy, and I mainly beat them on my first try because I was playing the easiest difficulty. And just because bosses are easy doesn't make them bad. I'm just dumbfounded by how much of a complete moron I was. So much I even got into a heated argument with some people on the internet. Believe me, I wasn't ready to be in those kinds of arguments on the internet, because I had only just started talking publicly with people at the time. I mean, sure, I did have a few complaints that were almost good enough arguments to ruin a game, like not being able to fight in Atlantica and no longer being able to level grind in tournaments. but those are only 2 worlds in the game that has 15 worlds. That's like 13% of the entire game. Ha, funny, 13%. And like the case with Guardian Sign's past missions, are optional. Though I guess I did have one argument that might be valid, the fact that Sora's kinda cockier than he was in the first game, but he's definitely much more tolerable than most cocky characters, and I even grew to like him in this game just as much as I did in the first, if not more because he's still a fun character. Eventually, I decided to play through the game again, and I loved it. And it quickly became one of my favorite games on the PS2, and probably even my favorite game in the Kingdom Hearts franchise. The soundtrack is fantastic, it has an engaging storyline, even if it is weird, and some epic bosses. The game is just incredible, and it's a much better game than I once made it out to be, and that is why Kingdom Hearts 2 is the #1 game that grew on me.
Falcon Punch!